This is a video on how to test the mass airflow sensor, or the MAF. And so we're going to go ahead and test it with a fluke meter, scan tool, and with an oscilloscope. So we'll go from there. So I'll go with my hookups. So I've got my meter leads hooked up to the fluke. I've got one hooked up to battery ground, and the other one is back probed into the signal wire on the mass airflow sensor. So right up here where my finger is. So that's the signal wire on the mass airflow sensor. Now this mass airflow sensor, I had to look up on the service information, and this one is a frequency generator. So as more air is pushed or drawn into the engine, the frequency goes up. And so when you start the vehicle up, you'll see a little bit of frequency, and then as the air increases or the load increases on the engine, the frequency increases on the sensor. So let's see what that looks like. So I've got my meter hooked up. I showed you those the connections. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my meter to volts DC, and then I'm going to select the frequency range, which is this one over here, the hertz range. So I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to start the vehicle. So as soon as I turn the key on, it's going to start calibrating itself, and then when I start the vehicle, you'll see an actual number show up there. So right now we're reading 2.5 hertz, and as I increase the engine RPM, it increases. So that's how you would test a mass airflow sensor with a fluke meter. Some of them read in hertz, some of them read in voltage, so you have to look up in the service information and find out what style of mass airflow sensor you have before you can accurately test it. The mass airflow sensor with a scan tool, there again I did not disconnect the scan tool from the vehicle, I just left it hooked up. We're going to go to the mass airflow sensor, which is right here. I'm going to highlight that, and that'll open it up. So now what I can do is start the vehicle up. And if you notice, it's graphing my mass airflow sensor here, and I'm also getting a frequency number up here. So right now we're at looks like 2,000 something. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to rev the engine up and make sure that it changes. So all I'm looking for is I'm looking for a reaction. So mass airflow sensor measures the amount of air coming into the engine. So if the amount of air coming into the engine changes, so should the signal. And so that's what I'm looking for. So that's how you test the mass airflow sensor with a scan tool. To hook my meter leads up to the scope, I'm going to do the same hack that I've done on the others. So I'm going to take the meter lead out of my positive, which is this yellow one, and the one out of the negative. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the positive and I'm going to plug it into the back of my blue lead, which is the positive on my scope, and the black goes in with black. And now I've got my meter leads hooked up for the oscilloscope, and I didn't have to disconnect them from the engine. Okay, checking it with an oscilloscope, what I'm going to do is, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can come up here to automotive, go to sensors, and this is calling it an airflow meter. And then there again, you need to know whether it's a digital or a hot wire sensor. I was trying that earlier and it wasn't working out very well. So what I'm going to do is just go to the regular standard setup. So without going to the automotive drop down, I'm going to go over here to channel A, and I'm going to drop that down. I'm going to make sure that I'm looking at 1X or X1, which is the meter leads. That's what I want. Now this is a frequency based sensor. So I want to have those meter leads, so that's good. I'm going to close that out, and then I'm going to put this little box, the next one, on auto. So you hit this little box here, you've got all kinds of different settings you can do on that. I'm just going to put it on auto, and then close that. There we go. And I'm going to start the trace, and I'm going to start the vehicle up. There we go. The trace didn't start when I started the vehicle up, but here's the trace. Now if you notice on this, I'm going to freeze frame this. You can see where it's on off, so it comes on, then it shuts off a little bit, and then this is a frequency based sensor. So what it's doing is it's counting how many of those little frequencies you've got. Now watch what happens. I'm going to start the trace again. Watch what happens when I rev the engine up. So when I rev the engine, you see how they get really close together? So that's how you test the mass airflow sensor with an oscilloscope. During lab. And we'll see you in the next video.